Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you are new here, then please do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. A massive welcome back to the channel for NFL draft expert Jack Brentnall, who has ever so kindly lent me more of his time to do a prospect dives, pardon me, on a few players for our Cleveland Browns. Whilst I consider myself to be fairly knowledgeable when it comes to the NFL draft, Jack, in my opinion, is on another planet, so I'm incredibly grateful for him coming on here to give you guys, as well as myself, a more in-depth analysis on, some of this year's prospects. Jack's really good at what he does, as I said, and if you don't believe me, go check out the Touchdown NFL's 500-page draft guide, I think it is. Basically a dictionary for all the draft prospects this year. Truly one of the best draft guides out there, so I'll make sure to link that in the description if you are interested. But without further ado, we're going to dive into some players, some prospects for the Browns. I personally think there's only 3 players that, are in consideration for the number 2 pick. Probably only 2 if we're being honest. But we're going to cover all 3 of those guys, as well as a quarterback that I've had my eyes on for pretty much most of the off season as well. Make sure you check out all of these dives, and hopefully they can teach you a lot about what will be the Cleveland Browns' first round draft pick since 2021. So moving on to Abdul Carter, I've not hid the fact that this has been pretty much my favourite prospect for most of the off-season process as we've been looking at the draft. Pretty much since it was confirmed that the Browns had the number 2 overall pick, this has kind of been the guy for me. What it comes down to is just, we've spoken about Travis Hunter, we've spoken about the impact he can have at receiver, the impact he can have at corner as well. But for me, I just think in the Browns' current position that they're in, if you had an Abdul Carter next to a Myles Garrett, I just think the impact that would have for both players would be so massive that it's been too good to almost pass up in that kind of vision for me. Of course, he's not really been, his draft stock has dropped, shall we say, I think purely just because he's not participated in any of the combine. He's not participated at his pro day. He's been dealing with some injuries. I think because of that, that's the reason why his kind of draft stock has fallen. I don't know if you saw, was it yesterday? He posted a picture on Twitter of Lawrence Taylor in a Giants uniform, of course. So I wonder why he was posting that. But as we did with Travis Hunter, what is your initial kind of just overlook on Abdul Carter?
I think for me, like if you're talking about what he does well and why he's such a good prospect, it's the pass rush talent. Now he obviously was a linebacker to begin his career, and he moved to edge for 2024. Obviously, you can see this is where the parallels start with Micah Parsons. Obviously, both played Penn State, both
Yeah.
wore number 11, and both, well, I suppose Parsons didn't move to edge until he was in the NFL, but both made that move from off-ball linebacker to edge rusher. What really stood out for me with Carter, and is like really the moment you go, okay, this guy is pretty special, is you go and watch him rushing the passer, especially on kind of third downs and obvious passing situations. He knows how to win, and he has like a deep arsenal of moves. He can win in a range of ways. Now, like I say, this guy started playing this position full time this year, and he is already one of the most technically proficient and advanced pass rushers in the class. Like that immediately is like, okay, I'm sold. Because if this is what this guy looks like in year 1,
Yeah.
imagine what he is going to look like down the line. Like that for me, if I'm selling myself on the vision of Abdul Carter, that's it. Because there's a lot of these edge rushers, a lot of these players generally in this class who've been playing that position since high school. And he spent the first couple of seasons of his college career as an off-ball linebacker full time, and he's only really beginning to scratch the surface of kind of what he can be, which would have me super excited.
Yeah, and I mean he's so young. He will be 21 as a rookie, pretty much for the whole season. I think he turns 22 in January next year. You mentioned that he switched to edge full time in this past year. 12 sacks, 24 tackles for loss. incredible numbers that, some of the best pass rushers coming out in the last decade have, not even some of those guys have put up numbers like that. Of course, numbers isn't everything, but it is an indicator nonetheless. As I mentioned, he didn't test or anything like that. So I think that's kind of why he's fallen out of the spotlight a little bit. But for me, as I said, the idea of pairing him with Myles Garrett, maybe you could say I should bring this up as a weakness, but it's not a weakness for me because, the argument that a lot of Browns fans have had against drafting him is why do you need him when you have a Myles Garrett? And I just think that's a silly argument. You can never have too many good defensive linemen. But then also the idea that, the scheme fit stuff. He's more of an outside linebacker. Should play in a 3-4. I've just seen him switch to edge full time, as you said, for one season, and he's already so good and developed so much in just 1 year that I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that he will be more than fine playing in a 4-3. So none of those things come even into my mind when it comes to drafting Abdul Carter for me. Strengths, moving on to those, you kind of mentioned some of them there, but what are the key strengths for Abdul Carter?
I think again, like with any top prospect, right? The athleticism is there. He's incredibly explosive. I think obviously, like you say, he's not tested because of his stress fracture. But had he tested, I think we'd be looking at some kind of similar numbers to guys like Michael Parsons. I would not be surprised if this guy ran a low 4.4 in the 40. I think one of the things I'm always looking for when I look at an edge rusher is the three ways you want them to win. Can they win round the outside? Can they win through the chest of the tackle? And can they win on the inside with counters? He does all three. I think like that for me is, you can survive with one or two. Most players can probably do two. You'll have a few guys who can only do one of those things, but they do it very well.
Yeah.
And that's enough to get by. But the truly elite edge rushers can do all three because that's what really puts tackles in a bind. I think he's obviously also the kind of guy that if you've got a creative defensive coordinator, you could use him in loads of different ways, right? He's obviously got that off-ball background. I don't think anyone's suggesting he plays off-ball in the NFL, but if you want to have him kind of mugging up over the center and then dropping back into coverage, he's more than capable of playing in space, whether that's dropping back into zone or kind of manning up against a running back or a tight end. So that versatility and that ability to move around the formation, move around the front, I think is really exciting. I also just think he plays with a kind of aggressive and physical demeanor, which, yes, I'm sure we'll come on to in terms of some of the weaknesses of his game, but like one that sticks in my mind is the first game of the season against West Virginia. Now, this was his first game as an edge, and there's a play where West Virginia are running kind of split zone, and he has to take on the split blocker, and he just absolutely crashes down on this guy. Like no regard for his kind of own self-preservation. He just wants to kind of blow this play up. Yeah. And you look at that and you're like, okay, some people are going to say, yeah, he's not the biggest, he's not necessarily the strongest, and I don't disagree there. But like, if you have a guy who's maybe a little undersized, maybe a little bit kind of lacking in play strength, as long as they have that attitude and they have the approach, then that for me is like, okay, that's fine. Like I can work with this. I think, it's just a well-rounded skill set for me.
Yeah, I mean, you made a great point. It's one of the key things that sticks out for me the most. People say, "Oh, he's undersized. He's a little bit. They want him to be a bit heavy." I mean, just to note that he is heavier than what Will Anderson was coming out, and I think that worked out pretty well for the Texans. But as you said, he plays with a physicality. He's a violent player in a good way. As you said, so many examples on tape of just bone crunching hits. He's not afraid to throw himself in there, but he does it in a way that's not reckless. You don't want a player that's out there just throwing their limbs everywhere and getting injured every other game. He does it in a way that is sustainable, shall we say. Of course, the athleticism sticks out the most with Abdul Carter, as you said, as it does with a lot of the top prospects most years. Truly incredible bend the way he can get round the edge is probably, yes, partly because of his smaller frame, but you know it is slightly Von Miller-esque how he's able to get the bend, how he's able to generate such bend, and his ankles flex, and he's not snapped his ankle in college. So the way he's able to do it is truly baffling. I would probably break every and pull every ligament in my ankles if I was getting into some of the positions he is when he's going around the edge. And as you said, he wins in all three of those levels. A lot of pass rushers, maybe with his similar build, you get a lot of those guys that are kind of the quick kind of guys, but that's all they can really do. As you said, he can kind of do everything across the line. And you mentioned put him with a creative defensive coordinator. Jim Schwartz, in my opinion, is one of those, and is a guy that I think could truly unlock him. You think about the potential of him and Myles Garrett moving those two around on the line, how much just havoc that creates for the offense, especially the offensive line. The quarterback's not going to know what to do. I would be absolutely pooing myself seeing those two guys, moving around, even just being there, let alone moving around. That's why it's been such a appealing choice for me. Is that essentially is just what you can do with him and Myles Garrett, and I think finally as well to kind of tie in with his violent and physical style. He also has a high motor and he doesn't give up on plays. Even when plays escape him. I've seen him mates a few plays at college where he's chasing down ball carriers, something that you just wouldn't see a defensive lineman do. It's just pretty insane to see. His high motor resulted in multiple sacks. Everyone uses cleanup sacks as a bad kind of bad thing, but in terms of when there's times where he initially will get blocked, but he stays with the play, or he's double teamed, he stays with the play, but the quarterback will then escape the pocket and he'll stay with the play and he'll go and make a play on either the quarterback or the ball carrier, whoever it is. That's why he had so many tackles for loss and why he picked up so many tackles for loss on a regular basis. And you mentioned it as well. You're not going to play him as an off-ball linebacker in the NFL, of course not. But having that experience does give him that versatility that, as you said, if you do want to move him around, he's not going to be just like a lost soul out there. He's going to know what to do if he does ever find himself in those situations. And I think that does also translate to a good IQ in terms of, sniffing out screens, just having a good football IQ as well. But as an edge rusher, I think is quite beneficial. And if you want to say, similar with Travis Hunter, if you don't want to say borderline generational player, I think you could say borderline generational athlete, especially at the edge position. And, as I said, the prospect of pairing him with Myles is just so enamoring for me, and terrifying, should be terrifying for the rest of the league. But as you said, there are some weaknesses. You could argue he's probably got more holes in his game maybe than a Travis Hunter, and maybe that's why we're starting to see this fall. But what are the weaknesses for Travis Hunter, for Abdul Carter, for you?
Yeah, I think it is play strength, and like I say, he does overcome that somewhat with the kind of physicality and aggression he plays with. But if you turn on the Minnesota game and the Oregon game, you'll see bits. So he's going up there against Arion Ursary from Minnesota and Josh Conley Jr. from Oregon.
Yeah.
And there will be times where they blow him off the ball, and he just gets completely wiped out. There was even, I think it was the Oregon game against tight end Terrence Ferguson, where he got taken for a ride by a tight end against the run, right? And so you watch that and you're like, okay, yeah, this needs work. But again, like I say, we need to recognize, again, like I say, it's the first season he's played there full time. This is not a guy who's been asked to set the edge until this season. I'm sure that will grow and develop. Yes, he is smaller, but he's not small. So I don't think that's like we're not looking at a guy who's like 6 foot 240 and we're going, okay, is this like a serious problem?
Yeah.
I think he can develop there. I think the other thing for me, which again, this is just another one that will definitely improve with time at the position. He has, as I mentioned, a deep kind of bag of pass rushing tricks, but he's not always the quickest to find a counter. You'll see him if he tries to win outside and the tackle kind of matches him. So again, this happened quite a bit in the Oregon game because Josh Conley Jr. is super quick.
Yeah.
one of the few guys who can actually match him kind of around the arc. Um, he can be a bit slow to kind of find that secondary move. But I mean, other than that, like there's not really a lot.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's the undersized stuff is what people use the most. Um, yes, there are examples of him, as you said on tape, getting just annihilated by some of these bigger offensive linemen, and there's times where he's just maybe he gets washed by double teams because he's not the strongest player. He's not Miles Garrett. But that's why I think going to the Browns would help him as well, because if you do put him next to a Miles Garrett, you're not going to be double team him. You're not going to be double teaming at the rate that he would at maybe another team. So that does free him up more while he has, as I said, he's still so young. So you can give him that luxury while also giving him more time to develop that, more arsenal of counters and things like that as well that he can use to become a more refined pass rusher. And I think as well, I mentioned it earlier. People want to say that he's not that great against the run, but I don't. I don't think it's something where I can actually go. That's a concern for me. I'm not going to draft him because he's not the best. Don't get me wrong. He's not, stuff. He's not the best run stuffer in college football. He's not going to come in and just swallow up double and triple teams and just linebackers and everyone. He's not. That's not how he plays. But I think for how good he is as a pass rusher, it's just not something that I really look into that much.
Yeah, he's fine, right? Like as a run defender, he's fine. It's not his
Yeah,
strength, but you're not drafting a guy. If
yeah,
you're drafting a guy number two as an edge, you're not drafting them
yeah,
to
yeah.
because of their run defense. It's
There's,
important, but I think that's more of like a if you hit the if there's a flaw, as long as you clear that flaw,
yeah,
it's kind of fine.
yeah,
Like you'd rather it be that way than the other way around.
yeah. Completely agree. And I mean, are there injury concerns? Obviously, you mentioned the stress fracture in the foot. I believe it was. He's been dealing with a shoulder injury at the end of the. He played through that shoulder injury in the playoffs. Maybe that's a concern for you. But again, how many prospects are coming into the NFL with a completely clean injury history?
Yeah, and I think with those, it's like are they recurring? Are they consistent problems? Um, and I think you look at the foot. I think it doesn't sound from the reports you read that it's particularly serious. Um, I wouldn't worry too much about durability. Like I say, I know he's not the biggest, but he's big enough. I don't think and I don't think there's anything about his play style that tells me like he's gonna struggle with durability.
Yeah. And I think finally the only thing as well, when it gets to this point with these prospects, they're trying to look for anything to pick the thing out. He was arrested in 2024, I believe it was, for assaulting a tow truck driver. Take that as you will. There's not been any pattern of bad behaviour. It seems to be that was a one-off thing. So I don't think that's something. We've seen some players come in with far worse, backgrounds and legal problems, shall we say, than that, and it's not affected him. So I don't think one charge there is gonna affect him. And I mentioned it earlier. He's a little bit weird on social media. He's a little bit one of those like cryptic guys. Will he be the Juju Smith-Schuster of the edge position? But that's a joke. Obviously, I don't care what a player does on social media as long as it's not detrimental to themselves or the team, or they're not harming anyone. If he's weird, that might just be because he's 21 and I'm getting a bit old, and I'm not as down with the kids as I think that I am. But bottom line for me, as I said, for Abdul Carter, he has been. I'm not shy in saying that he has been my number one preference, pretty much for most of this process. As I said, the biggest reason, just the idea of pairing him next to Miles Garrett just seems almost too exciting to pass up on. I truly believe they could be one of, if not the best pass rush duos in the NFL for years to come if that was the move that you were going to do. As I mentioned, the whole Browns don't need them stuff. I think it's ridiculous. You can never have enough good defensive linemen. And, I'll sing the praises of, some of the Browns' rotational pieces on their defensive line as much as anyone, especially in Isaiah McGuire. But take Miles out of that defensive line and the production halves at best. It might probably be even more than that. Why not give him a legitimate option next to him? that won't cost you as much money as what they've been doing the last few years with a Darius Smith or Jadeveon Clowney. I love his desire to be great, as I mentioned with the social media stuff. He's made it clear he wants to be the number one pick. He won't, of course. So, a pissed off Abdul Carter with something to prove sounds terrifying for opposing offensive linemen and quarterbacks, but very exciting as a Browns fan. But, as I mentioned with Travis Hunter, I don't think the Browns can go wrong in drafting either Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. These are the two blue chip prospects in the draft for me. I think the Browns have to walk away with one of them. And I would be, as a Browns fan, incredibly excited for either of them. So finally, as I did with Hunter, how excited should Browns fans be if they were to draft an Abdul Carter?
Yeah, I think it'd be great, right? And I think the thing here, like, not to get too much into like the weeds of trench play, but you've said it there about, the impact that Myles Garrett has is beyond what he does as an edge rusher himself. It's the attention he draws,
Yeah,
and then allows those other guys to produce beyond what they would otherwise do. If you think about offensive lines, if it's a 5-man protection, they'll double, or they'll at least kind of slide towards Myles Garrett, or they'll keep a tight end or running back in to help chip. You can do that if there's one really good edge rusher on the field. If you have two, you have a 5-man offensive line. You can't double two guys.
Yeah.
You can't slide both ways, right? Like you can cause absolute chaos if you have both of them, whether it's kind of overload pressures on one side with one of them and then leaving the other one kind of in a one-on-one on the other side. The challenge that the Browns will have with Myles Garrett is offenses are trying to kind of stop him being in one-on-one situations, and they can do that, right? They can scheme around him. If you've got both of those guys on the field, one of them is going to be one-on-one, and if either of them is one-on-one, they're probably winning, right?
Yeah.
And that's a terrifying thought if you're not a Browns fan. As a Browns fan, that would be the most exciting thing. I think just watching that defense, it's already fun to watch. Watching it with an Abdul Carter on, sign me up.
Yeah, I think, as I said, I don't think they can go wrong with either pick. Would be incredibly exciting, would add so much to the team. So, we're going to do some dives into another player that, I don't think will be the potential, is potentially going to be the number 2 pick for the Browns, but I know some people are still talking about it, so that's why I will do it. But for me, it's one of these two guys. I think the Browns just have to walk away with either an Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. But Jack, thank you so much again for giving me your time to talk some NFL draft. I'm always a smarter man after talking to you, so I really do appreciate it. Before you go, please let everyone know where they can find you and the amazing work that you do.
It's been great to be on, mate. So thanks for having me. You can find me on Twitter or whatever we call it these days, Jack_Brentnall. My pinned tweet is the Touchdowns 2025 NFL Draft Guide as well. So if you haven't got your copy, it's £5, 500 and something pages worth of content. So worth having a look at if you are wanting to be ready for draft night. So yeah.
Yeah, and I know I mentioned it in the intro. It truly is worth the money. I mean, £5 for, I'm not good at maths, but £5 for 500 pages, that's definitely good value for your buck. One of the best draft guides out there. Jack, as well as the Touchdown NFL, do such great work. So, as he said, if you are interested, especially at trying to get to some of these Browns, potential Brown targets, I encourage you to go check that out. As Jack said, either on his Twitter page, he's got it pinned over there, and I will also put the link in the description of this video to see where you can find it as well. So, Jack, as always, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on. I know this is your favourite time of the year. I know it's probably one of your busiest times of the year. So don't work yourself out too much, and hopefully the Packers have a somewhat decent draft that can get you pretty happy about.
Fingers crossed. We'll see.
Fingers crossed.